Mark and Sarah were perched on the veranda of their cherished summer retreat, a place that had been a backdrop for numerous summers filled with celebrations, laughter, and shared adversities. This quiet farewell was not only to the house, but also to a significant chapter in their lives. The gentle breeze carried the ocean scent, mingling with Sarah's familiar fragrance, a scent deeply ingrained in Mark's recollections. Yet, in that moment, the comfort he once felt was absent. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Sarah idly swirled her wine glass, the liquid inside moving without her notice. Her gaze was locked on the horizon, though her thoughts were distant. The silence that enveloped them was no longer the comfortable stillness of their early marriage, but one filled with hesitation, a silence pregnant with words unsaid. Mark noticed, as he always did. "I need to tell you something," Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely rising above the rhythmic sound of waves lapping the shore. Mark didn't respond immediately, instead taking a deep breath and placing his glass on the table. Sarah turned to him at last, her face bathed in the warm glow of the sunset, but her eyes revealed a burden she could no longer hide. She paused, and Mark took note of her restless hands, her tense shoulders, her gaze darting between his eyes and the floor. He understood, had understood for years, though Sarah was unaware. Before she could speak again, Mark offered a cryptic smile and said, "I already know everything." Sarah's breath caught. She blinked several times, as if she had misheard, as if her mind was trying to decipher his words differently, searching for an alternative meaning. "What?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion and alarm. Mark's eyes remained steady, calm, devoid of shock or anger, simply certain that this exchange was inevitable. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What exactly did he know? How did he find out? Had someone informed him, or had he always known, waiting for this moment? Suddenly, the weight of revelation became unbearable. The wine, the sunset, the summer house, everything once sweetly nostalgic now felt suffocating. She realized there was no escape. Sarah felt her face pale. Her body tensed as if she were being inexorably pulled toward an inescapable chasm. The sound of the waves, once comforting, now seemed distant, drowned by the storm of thoughts in her mind. Her heart raced, her breathing grew shallow. She attempted to speak, but words eluded her. Mark observed her steadily, without any hint of anger or resentment. It was as though he was simply waiting to see how she would respond. The silence stretched interminably until Sarah finally mustered the courage to ask, "What do you mean by that?" Her voice barely above a whisper, and Mark noticed. He tilted his head slightly, scrutinizing her expression, as if he already knew what was to unfold. "You think I never knew," he said with unsettling calm. "You think I never noticed the glances, the uneasy silences, the fleeting touches that were just too quick to catch?" Sarah opened her mouth only to shut it again. She struggled to regain composure, but her demeanor betrayed her. She shifted in her seat, averting her gaze, her mind racing for an escape. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, though even she doubted her own words. Mark chuckled dryly, shaking his head. He wasn't interested in prolonging the discussion. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Sarah," he continued, eyes unwavering. "John." Hearing that name felt like a punch in Sarah's gut. Her body betrayed her before she could mask it, a subtle twitch, a prolonged blink, a sharp intake of breath, enough for Mark to see that she not only remembered but had never fully shed the guilt. Her head bowed as her fingers twisted the hem of her dress. Though the evening was warm, a chill settled over her. "That was a long time ago," she murmured. "I know," Mark replied, "and I knew back then." Sarah's gaze snapped up, her heart seemingly ceasing for a moment. If he had known, why had he remained silent? How could he share a life with her, pretending nothing had happened? The answer came before she could even ask. "I never confronted you," Mark continued, his voice as calm and sharp as a knife, "because I chose a different way to deal with it." A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. His tone wasn't angry or bitter, it was something far more unsettling. It was the voice of someone who had carefully crafted a response to his pain. Mark exhaled deeply, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Do you know what I did, Sarah?" he asked. She She was silent, immobilized, like prey with no escape. I told Emily everything. Sarah's mouth fell open, but no words emerged. She blinked, struggling to process his revelation. What? She finally managed, breaking a tense silence. I told her, Mark reiterated, his gaze steady. I told the wife of the man you were with. Shock rippled through Sarah, unraveling everything she believed about the affair and Mark's response. You told Emily, she echoed, her voice quivering with disbelief. She had always thought that Mark hadn't known, or if he had, he'd chosen to silently move past it, whether out of love, pride, or to preserve their marriage. Yet now, everything made sense, the nights of distance, the vacant stares, the subtle shifts in his behavior over the years. He had never forgiven her, he had simply chosen a different path to process his pain. Then a terrifying realization struck her: if Mark told Emily, what followed? A tight knot formed in her throat, an overwhelming dread. Deep down, she sensed there was more. Mark wasn't impulsive. If he confided in Emily, he had a reason, and she was terrified to learn what it was. Her stomach twisted. Her eyes were fixed on Mark, yet her mind spun with memories and questions. The affair with John had been a mistake, a fleeting moment of weakness she wished to forget. She thought it was buried in the past. But now, her world was unraveling in ways she never anticipated. Her breath quickened, and the porch, once a haven, felt treacherous. Time crawled, each of Mark's words striking like a precision blow. She wanted to respond, to say something that might alter this course, but her voice faltered. What happened next? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Mark sighed softly, as if expecting her reaction. He leaned back, resting his arms on the chair, and for the first time, offered a faint, almost indifferent smile. Do you really want to know? Sarah remained silent. Part of her longed to scream, to demand the truth, unable to endure the suspense. Yet another instinct warned her to brace for the worst. Mark raised his wine glass, swirling the liquid unhurriedly, and said, Emily and I became lovers. That declaration pierced Sarah like a dagger. Sarah's heart seemed to stop, then beat widely out of control. What? Her voice cracked as she blinked repeatedly, struggling to comprehend his words. Her chest felt painfully tight, as if she couldn't draw a breath. Mark, however, remained composed, observing her reaction with a detached calm, as if merely stating the obvious. You and John did it once, just once, and you regretted it. But for me, Sarah, it was never about how many times. Once, 100 times, it doesn't matter. What mattered is that the moment you chose to be with someone else, something between us shattered. A flash of heat spread across her face, fueled not by shame, but by outrage. Mark's words pierced her like anchors, impossible to dismiss. You slept with Emily, she repeated, still reeling. For how long? Mark offered a faint smile, as if revealing the final piece of a long-buried truth. Years. A chill washed over Sarah. Years. It wasn't a fleeting error or a momentary lapse. It was a sustained relationship, hidden in plain sight. You stayed with me all this time while being with another man's wife? Her voice trembled. Mark took a sip of wine before responding. Exactly how you stayed with me after being with another woman's husband. Sarah rose abruptly. The wind tossed her hair, but she felt nothing except the fury surging through her. You can't compare those things, she shouted, her chest burning. I made a mistake. I regretted it. It never happened again. Mark remained serene. His eyes, however, held something she couldn't quite fathom. To you, it was a mistake. To me, it was a turning point. The way he said it sent a chill down her spine. There was a finality in his words, as if he hadn't simply retaliated with betrayal but had undergone a fundamental shift in perspective on life, marriage, love. Nausea swept over her. Reality felt distorted, as if the world she'd known had been pulled from beneath her. And the harshest truth emerged: Mark had never forgiven her. He never attempted to forget. He never sought to mend their marriage. He sought revenge, and he achieved it. A lump formed in her throat. The night air, now icy against her skin, was nothing compared to the cold spreading within her. Her eyes were fixed on Mark, but she no longer recognized him. This wasn't the husband she thought she knew, the partner she'd shared her life with. No, this was a stranger, someone who had methodically planned his own vengeance over the years. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. Her entire body shook, not from the cold, but from the shock. "You spent years deceiving me," her voice quivered, barely more than a whisper, laden with disbelief. "You spent years lying to me, saying you loved me, all while being with her." Mark stood unwavering, simply watching. His gaze wasn't cruel, yet it showed no remorse. "Yes," he affirmed without hesitation. Sarah blinked, stunned. Part of her yearned to believe he was lying, trying to wound her as he'd been hurt. But the serenity in his voice, the chill in his demeanor, confirmed this was no exaggeration. There was no dramatization, only raw truth. "My God," Sarah murmured, pressing a hand to her forehead. She felt suffocated. Her mind flashed through every memory with Mark since the affair. How many times had he held her while already involved with Emily? How many times had he professed love without sincerity? She felt sick, betrayed in a way she never anticipated. "I hate you." The words escaped her lips before she could stop them. Mark laughed, but it wasn't mocking, it was empty, devoid of emotion. "I know," he replied simply. "And you know what? I don't blame you." Sarah's eyes locked onto his, fury and disbelief mingling as she tried to comprehend how he could be so detached, how he could utter such words without flinching. "You destroyed me, Mark." Her voice, though steadier now, was still laced with pain. Mark tilted his head, as if considering her accusation. Slowly, he replied, "You destroyed me first." The impact of his response made Sarah step back. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words formed, because deep down, she knew it was true. A heavy, almost unbearable silence fell between them. The sound of waves faded into the background, as if the world had vanished, leaving just this moment. Mark finally rose from his chair, hands sliding into his pockets. He regarded her for a long moment, and this time his gaze carried something different. There was no anger, no triumph, perhaps just fatigue. "This marriage ended a long time ago, Sarah. One of us just had to admit it." His words were like a verdict, the official end to something that had been dead in practice for years. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't cry in front of him, wouldn't grant him that satisfaction. She lifted her chin, inhaled deeply, and spoke with all the resolve she could muster. "You're right." Mark's eyebrows rose slightly, surprised by her response, but he said nothing. He merely nodded once and, without another look, retreated into the house. Sarah remained there, alone on the porch, feeling the weight of the decision she had just embraced. For the first time, she realized there was nothing left to salvage. Her gaze fixed on the dark horizon, the wind now whipped through the trees, making the curtains in the open doorway sway. The ocean scent lingered, but it no longer brought nostalgia. Instead, it carried a sense of suffocating emptiness. The initial burst of anger had faded, leaving only deep exhaustion, not just physical, but emotional, the weariness of living a lie for years, unknowingly. She heard footsteps behind her but didn't turn around. She knew it was Mark. He stopped at a respectful distance, his presence palpable. "What are you going to do now?" he asked, breaking the silence. It took Sarah a moment to answer, not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to choose her words carefully. "I'm leaving." Mark didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, absorbing her decision. Perhaps part of him had anticipated this. Perhaps this was what he had hoped for all along. "You're going back to the city?" he asked. "I am," she replied, "but not to be with you." There was a finality to her words, as if she were closing a chapter that had only moments ago been uncertain. Mark sighed lightly, not with surprise or regret, but with acceptance. "I think that's the best choice," he finally said. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, feeling the burden in her chest. So many years wasted, so many missed opportunities to communicate, to try to repair or be truthful. But now it was too late. She turned to face him, and for the first time that evening, she noticed something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Mark wasn't gloating. He didn't appear triumphant. He looked hollow. "What about you?" she asked. He shrugged. "I'll stay a few more days, then head back home." Home. The word felt foreign because, in that instant, Sarah realized that house had never truly been a home. It was merely a stage where they had performed for far too long. She nodded, saying nothing more. Then, without hesitation, she went inside to gather her belongings. She moved through the quiet hallway, each room still echoing with remnants of a past that seemed certain until just a few hours ago. Yet now, they were mere shadows of something that had never truly been. When she returned to the living room, Mark remained on the porch, staring blankly into the distance. He didn't acknowledge her footsteps, didn't attempt to halt her departure. She walked past him, unhurried, absorbing every detail of that moment, the cool breeze, the ocean scent, the waves' gentle rhythm, the moonlight casting patterns on the wooden porch floor. Pausing at the door, she said, "Goodbye, Mark." He stayed silent for a moment before finally murmuring, "Goodbye, Sarah," without turning around. She crossed the threshold without a backward glance. As the door closed softly behind her, she realized it was truly over. Not just the end of a marriage, but the conclusion of everything she once believed was real.